To understand the Spanish Civil War, we first need to understand who this is. This is King Alfonso XIII, one of the last leaders of the Bourbon dynasty in Spain. Alfonso was seen as a peacemaker and fairly popular at first in Spain for keeping the nation out of the horrors of World War I. But increasingly, people were getting tired of the social and economic stagnation that was occurring under his regime. In 1930, one of Alfonso's prime ministers forced elections, which saw the leftist Republicans win and then proclaim Spain a republic. Alfonso was actually going to fight back against this change, but after the army voiced their support for the leftist Republican government, simply left to Italy. I can't really blame him though, he looks like he's having a lot of fun there with his wife. After all of the abdication mess, a new Spanish government was formed, the Second Spanish Republic. After the new government's creation and a series of unceremonious presidencies, the new government found itself in almost the exact same position that Alfonso had several years earlier, with more and more extremist independence group advocating for the independence of the Basque Country and Catalonia. Unlike the two presidents before him, President Manuel Azaña, who was elected in 1936, was a reformer. Azaña's reforms gave women the right to vote and improved the lives of most workers in Spain. Increasingly, with more and more of Azaña's reforms targeting the left, the right felt increasingly isolated. One of these far-right intellectuals who believed the left was going too far in Spain was José Antonio Primo de Rivera, who advocated for a strong, right-wing state that was centered around Spain's Catholic beliefs. Antonio founded the Falange Española de las Juntas de Ofensiva Nacional Sindicalista, or the Spanish Phalanx of the Councils of the National Syndicalist Offensive. With much more anti-right-wing actions taking place across the countries and many high-ranking monarchist and fascist officials being assassinated, at around this time, most of the army was fairly far-right, one of the most elite of these armies being Francisco Franco's African army. This army coordinated with multiple other right-wing leaders in mainland Spain that would try and overthrow the Republican government. With the support of the army, many fascist leaders thought that the Republican government would immediately surrender. But fun fact, no. Immediately after hearing of the news of the army's mutiny, Manuel Azaña approved thousands of guns to be sent to workers' militia and other democratically aligned groups. The Spanish Civil War had begun. At the beginning of the Civil War, the fascists definitely were not in a good position. The Republicans had much of the industry and the navy on their side, as well as large cities like Madrid and Barcelona. Soon after the war started though, the Republicans immediately found themselves in a weak spot. Several different factions vying for power: Democrats, liberals, communists, and anarchists. These units with their own ideological loyalties, including many foreign volunteer units with many actually coming from America, would have a lot of problem actually cohesing attacks and a defense against the nationalist troops. Any sympathies for the Republican government, though, soon vanished among many regular Spaniards. The reason for this being is the many war crimes that the Republican government did against the Catholic Church, with them seeing the Catholic Church as the source of the nationalist movement and responsible for the war in the first place. This drove more and more people to the nationalist side, especially the more traditional and Catholic Spaniards. Increasingly, the Republicans saw the war turn more and more against their favor. Remember all of the other political parties I was talking about earlier? Well, yeah, the anarchists decided they were going to stop cooperating with the only people who were on their side, the Republicans, and decided to launch an uprising and pretty much doom the Republican government to fail. While this all was happening, the Germans and the Soviets both took interest in the Spanish Civil War as a place to test their new equipment. Nationalist Spain was allied with Nazi Germany and Italy, and the Republican government was allied with the Soviets, and to a much lesser extent, France and Mexico. Each side's allies gave them tanks, warplanes, and volunteers to fight. Eventually, the Soviets stopped sending aid to the Republican Spanish once they realized the war was lost. Eventually, on the 1st of April 1939, the Republican government surrendered and Franco had to deal with having to rebuild the nation. Franco is a controversial figure in Spain, especially due to the fact that he had decreased autonomy for the Basque countries and Catalonia. The legacy that Franco left on Spain is undeniable though, with him being seen by many as a savior and traditionalist of Catholicism in Spain, and others seeing him as a brutal dictator who put people who didn't agree with him in concentration camps. Over 500,000 Spaniards were killed in just 2 years of fighting, with almost 200,000 of these being civilians. After the war, Franco solidified power and formed Spain under a new national identity, one of first being Catholic and second being Spanish. The leftist groups that once were evident in Spain went underground and would eventually reveal themselves almost 40 years later, after Franco's death and the rise of a democratic Spain which continues to this day. I hope this video was informative and gracias por escuchar.